but I wanted to start the class talking to you about the quiz. So the quiz is made of 30 questions, multiple choice, and there's not much that I want to say with this because most of the questions were well done, and there were a few questions that every individual had a problem with, but there was no real questions that everyone had problem with that I need to bring up today. However, the open-ended questions, I wanted to bring up something that I find that is interesting is the fact that there are different ways of answering those open-ended questions depending on the students. And so there are many creative answers and creative students when it comes to answering these questions. And I wanted to specifically talk about those individuals. Nazarian, it's like, you know, she discussed different people, and she has a very smart way of discussing the different individuals that she's commenting. Chloe Deemer, what's interesting is she answers by giving multiple numbers for her answer. So instead of saying writing 2 paragraphs or 1 paragraph and jamming everything in 1 paragraph, she would say, oh, the answer to that question is important, but based on 3 points, less than 5 points. And then she goes into the first point is this, the second point is that. So I recommend that method. Sophia Garcia Silva, she starts with the definition. So she looks at the question and defines the term in the question. So to me, that's very important to define the terms, and I'll go back to it just in a minute. And then Joshua Hayes gave 1 example, 2 examples. The answer is in the example, having as many examples as possible. So you probably had the most example, and I thought that was really good. And then Gabriel Resmini and that's a very unique way, but he's rephrasing the question. So here's the question. It says, from this question, I understand that question. And from that question, I understand that answer. And so why the marketing definition include the concept of profit, Gabriel said, becomes, what does the concept of profit have to do with the definition of marketing? If marketing is about satisfying customer wants and needs. So I think that was very clever to reorganize the question into, hey, you know what? I like your question, but I want to answer even a better question than yours, Professor. Your question is okay. Let me make it even better than you. I know what you're trying to say. I know what you're trying to make us say. So very smart. I have to say that I really enjoy your cohort because there's a lot of not only intelligent people, but very emotionally intelligent people in this cohort. And from that perspective, I think it's my favorite cohort because of the emotional intelligence. A lot of respectful people, a lot of people that may be frustrated, but instead of being frustrated, they eventually try to address the situation and say, okay, you know, let me think about this. And so last Saturday was just a witness of that. Everyone came with a very good attitude, and everyone was excited to see what I had to say. And so, geez, that's a way to learn, is this very respectful, let me hear, let's discuss, what do you think of this? Oh, it doesn't work. Okay, I'll fix it. So this, I'll fix it, I'll take care of it attitude is fantastic. I mean, that's, again, I'm a business professor, and to me, it's taking care of business. And so this, I take care of it is great. But having said that, if there is an open-ended question, what should you do first? What you should do second? And here's my point, is first, don't answer by a yes. There was a lot of people that were, you know, nobody did that in this class, but that's the first time. What I'm going to say, you may be laughing and you may be believing is, it may not even be true. But to the question, should companies do marketing research? I've had students answer yes, and that's it. Nothing more. Yes. Like it was a yes or no. So obviously you want to go beyond the yes. But it was a number of people that just said yes and say, well, marketing research is cool. Why not? You got to have marketing research. With research, you can do some research. With marketing research, you can do some marketing research. And they don't go much in depth versus the people I mentioned before, giving examples and all of that. So my little takeaway, and I'm not trying at least I'm not trying to insult you, but and as you can see, thinking about your grade, probably you got a good grade. Most of the people got a good grade. So it's not like I'm telling you, you didn't do well, but I'm thinking you can do better and learn something from this experience. And I just want to share it with you as open-ended question. Try to elaborate. So start by defining the terms. Longer is better. So what I mean by that is I'm not grading you or evaluating you based on the weight of your answer. The more words, the better. But just imagine that this question is worth 20 points. And just imagine that before you had to do multiple choice and each one was worth 2 points. So for that question to be worth 20 points, it's got to be more than 15 words, to be honest. I need to have something to bite on. So try to make it longer. I think it will help elaborate. Provide examples. So as a summary inside the gray box here, I say elaborate versus being too brief, too limited. I don't think you don't want to be too long either, where you sort of muddy the water and I don't really know what you're talking about. And you is trying to cover the entire subject of marketing and say everything that you know in order to get points. That's also wrong. So you need to be on the subject, but you want to elaborate. Define the concept, the ideas that you want to discuss, justify versus just saying, yes, it's important, say, why is it important, lots of why, and then examples. And so one thing that I find very enjoyable is to read when people have personal example. You know, the example that says the professor say X, Y, and Z, I guess it's good. The textbook said X, Y, and Z, I think it's good. But there's people that wrote their own personal example of something and you made a huge difference. So I don't know if you'll remember this, but I'm hoping that by me addressing this today will make your quiz, the final quiz better and probably the next quizzes in the next class even better because you will take the opportunity to use that little formula. And that's not just a formula for quizzes at CSUN to take the MIA last 2 classes, but it's a recommendation for anything that you do. So you are asked questions by the media, you being interviewed or whatever, just try to rephrase the question, try to define the terms that the person asking you, try to elaborate, try to give the pros and cons, try to give your opinion, try to give some examples. And you will see that you will be perceived as a much more intelligent person, much more expert, and having more confidence, and maybe having more charisma as well. So that's my 5 cents recommendation for you, which goes beyond the marketing class, but I think I wanted to tell you that. So should companies do marketing research? I'm not going to take a lengthy time going through all of this, but I want you to see that there's so many reasons why companies should do marketing research. So therefore, elaborating was something that you could do. First, what's the definition of marketing research? What's the definition of marketing? What's the definition of a company that's doing these things? What is the reason is the world is changing and need to adapt. The businesses need to make better decisions. They want to reduce risk. They want not to spend money, but decision costs money, so they want to create higher profit. Marketing research helps you define the problem, the solution, the opportunities. It helps you with your SWOT. It helps you with the consumer. Obviously, you talk about satisfaction. You want to know what is it, the satisfaction. It helps you analyze your competitors, the 4P strategies, and so forth. The idea of just noticeable differences, that's what you do when you do marketing research. You identify that gap that you can take advantage of. And then here, the example is how did they come up with the concept of station wagon versus a van versus a SUV versus a subcompact car. This was not someone that just started designing a car because he was an artist, and then GM took the artwork from that artist and made the car. He came because there was a need in the market, there was a want in the market, there was some change in the market that they could take advantage of by creating a product that was targeting these people. So as you can see, I'm trying to elaborate because I want you to see that there is an opportunity to go in depth and try to be more more substance. Why the marketing definition include the concept of profit? So here again, how can you answer this question? You start by defining what's marketing, what's the concept of profit. Talk about the fact that satisfaction is the centerpiece of what you try to do in business and marketing, and therefore satisfaction is not free. To create satisfaction is you need to understand that it takes money to do that, and you need profit in order to keep satisfying the customer. The concept is very much about the fact that you want to stay in business, and with profit, that's how you can stay in business. You can also use this investment to create innovation. You can also do some research. The idea as well, which is interesting, is if you make profit, you can make higher quality product. And that way it's a competitive advantage to make profit because you can use that. Another way is also companies that are profitable are the one that gets most investors. So you're looking for investors, you want more investors, you want investors to come to you without asking them to come and invest. They will invest because they want to invest in winners. So when you have a profit also, it's an objective goal. It's not a subjective goal. So it's also very valuable to have objective goal is we want to make a 25% profit. So then you try to do everything you can to make that profit. So it's a goal that is measurable, that everybody can understand. It's a numerical goal. If you also, and that was one thing that was said by one or two people, is if you make profit, you can actually use this profit in order to enhance and benefit your community. If you are broke, how can you help someone else? If you are profitable, you can help. So it's not just about you becoming wealthy, it's about making the tide goes up in order to everyone to benefit from your wealth. And then finally, yeah, investors will see that they want to invest in you because you're profitable, and that would become a competitive advantage. So then, therefore, what I'm trying to say is, here you go. There's going to be two open-ended questions in the next quiz. Try to elaborate, try to define, try to show the pros and cons, try to give some examples, and I think that will make your response much better. So I've done this in the past many times, and it has been the same. It means that some students that do this naturally and there's some that don't. What would be the percentage? I would say there's a third that do this and 2/3 that don't. And then when I say this after the first quiz, then I have suddenly 2/3 that do it and 1/3 that still do not do it. You know, I'm not sure why they don't, but we multiply by a bit more than 2 the quality of the responses, and that's why I wanted to bring it up to you today. It's just a small little detail that I think would make a difference. Do you have any questions? No? Okay, so yeah, and all the reason I tell you all of this is because I care. I care in your understanding of business, but I care sort of of you as an overall becoming more than you can be, you know, not just marketing. It's the whole picture that I'm interested. So if I can give you a tip to improve anything overall, that's just the way I love my job, and I'm very careful for my students. So I try to bring more tips than just the marketing this, marketing that. The way of presenting and responding, I think is important. So here again, we go back to the centerpiece since the beginning. What are opportunities? They are not what you're going to do. So did I see any problem with this on Saturday? No, the good news, I think, is you've got it now. Nobody's telling me what they're doing in the opportunities. Out of the 4 groups, nobody did that. And I would say out of the 4 groups, there are 2 groups that are already in the green zone. They came up with a direction, and it looks like an opportunity, a strategic opportunity, and that's good. And there's 2 groups, you know, they're still working at it, and that's a little bit better than average. So we're okay. But the 2 groups are not. They need to come up with opportunities. And remember, the difficulty with this is that they be strategic, not tactical. Tactical opportunities, I would imagine if we had to do it again on Saturday, you probably all have good opportunities, but they be tactical. So the difficulty is for your opportunities to be facts that change in the environment that you can take advantage of, and they are strategic. So I'll go back to the STP because it's an important thing. I started discussing it, and we have marketing, segmentation, market targeting, and positioning. So that's the 3 steps. So now, what are the basic characteristics of segmentation? Is how do you divide people? So segmentation is dividing, targeting is selecting, and positioning is creating an image. So that's the 3 things. So the element of segmentation, and I discussed exactly that last week, so I won't go into details, but you have multiple characteristics that define the consumer and their behavior, and all of these characteristics is what you can use in order to separate the customers from one another. And all of those elements can be what you use in order to create the persona. No, discuss that. Some of you have presented personas. All of you pretty much presented targets and personas when you did the Valley Hive, and also when you did it on Saturday. and if maybe you recognize yourself, but many of you put the target at the very end of the presentation. And I was telling you, rationally, it's not the best position because you want to discuss who's the target earlier than you did. So that way you can explain what you're going to do to them. So I would recommend that. How do you define the concept of targeting? So there's 3 levels of targeting. Level A is you target everybody, and it's called undifferentiated targeting. So undifferentiated targeting means that you make a product and it's for everyone, nobody specifically. It's not for kids, it's not for women, it's not for poor people, it's not for educated people, it's just for everyone. So you're making, I don't know, you could imagine Coca-Cola. It's not targeting anyone specifically, it's anyone interested in a sweet soda or something like this. Then you have concentrated, and that's where it's the most interesting because undifferentiated, I have to talk about it because it's one of the options. But the reality is undifferentiated targeting method, it's sort of disappeared from the equation. Nobody choose that one because the world is so competitive that you always are competing against someone, which means that you have to sort of differentiate yourself to some extent. So A exists, but it's kind of extinct, if you want. So the most important to really understand, because you will be using it, is B and C. So B is concentrated, which means that you have one product and multiple targets, versus C is the opposite, is you have one product with single target. So having one product for one specific group is great. So that's the one called differentiated, because you're making sure that the target that you're focusing on gets the exact product that they want. It's very, very specific. It's almost like getting a haircut. You know, I mean, I don't know that there's anyone that can cut someone's hair on multiple people at the same time. Usually they cut only your hair. I don't know there's a machine or some robot where they would be cutting 5 or 20 or 1,000 people at the same time. So a haircut is, if you want, it's differentiated, it's cutting your hair or only your hair. Versus concentrated, it would be like trying to cut 3 people's hair at the same time. So when you have a business, you can recognize multiple targets and decide to only make a product to that specific target. The advantage of differentiated is you're going to increase the anticipation of satisfaction because you're making a very specific product to a specific person. So you can imagine that they will be more satisfied because it's so pinpointed. Versus concentrated is one product for multiple targets. So therefore it's less specialized, less differentiated. Therefore you probably have less satisfaction. So the takeaway from this is if you are a startup, like the startup you're going to be in the next class, where you come up with your own product and your own business that you want to pitch to the class, most likely, and try to remember this, that you will want to take a differentiated targeting strategy. When you're a small business, you're better off trying to be amazing to a small group of people versus trying to be amazing to multiple group of people. The more you try to sell something to multiple people, the more expensive it's going to be because you're going to have multiple distribution, multiple products, multiple communication, multiple advertising, multiple type of things. So it's more expensive. So you're better off trying to focus on a narrower group of customers with one product. The potential return are lower, but the potential that you do well are higher statistically, the likelihood statistically. So you, small business, you're much better off being differentiated. You're a big business, you're much better off being concentrated. Or you can also be differentiated because you're so big, you can have multiple products for multiple targets and have all of these different divisions and departments in your business taking care of those different group of customers. But big businesses have multiple differentiated targeting strategies with multiple products because they can afford to have multiple products. But they can also have concentrated because the beauty with concentrated is you target even a broader number of customers because you have multiple customers in one basket. And so for a musician, it would be like saying, you know what, I make this music for USA and Canada. So that would be a concentrated. Versus a differentiated will be, you know, I make this type of music just for the southwest of the USA for just women from that area. And it's very, very concentrated. So by being more narrow on a specific target, you may be more knowing who they are and giving them exactly what they want. So just remember this. there's 3 targeting strategies, and it's important to identify the differences. So segmenting is identifying the characteristics and creating segment profile. So here I just have a little cartoons. And when we look at these little cartoons, are there 2 pictures of the same thing? No. Every picture is a single type of customer. So suddenly you say, you know what? How could we target these people? So then you could say, you know, we could target the pictures which someone is working, the picture of people that look like they're not working, the picture which is they look like women, the picture they look like men, the picture that they look they're on vacation, the picture that they have a hat, the picture that they don't have a hat. Is you group people based on characteristics. So having a hat is a characteristic. Having something in your hand is a characteristic. So when you divide people, identifying different characteristics and grouping people based on these characteristics is easy. What's hard is to identify the meaningful characteristics. Is grouping people based on their hat? Is the fact that you wear a hat makes you more or less the same? And that's what's difficult. So it's not selecting a characteristics randomly, is having the most meaningful characteristics in order to divide people. So suddenly, that's what you get, is you get the number 1 is 5 different color of people. And number 2 is trying to group them. So segmenting is dividing and targeting is grouping. So you try to see some similarity between the groups and you use what's called salient characteristics that are meaningful among them to group them. So visually, if you, let's take this map. Visually, what you have is you have people that buy a car, let's say for the image and for the status. But then you have people that buy a car for the how dependable and reliable it is. And you ask, I don't know, 50,000 people. And then you put it on a map and you get those 50,000 people represented by those dots. So then you could say, okay, we could focus on each one of those dots and that would be differentiated, or we can focus on a group of those dots and that would be what you would call concentrated. So here I'm doing a concentration, which is I will create a product that focus on those 3 sub dots, those color dots. So I'm going to have a car that is not very dependable, but is high in status. Then another car, which is low in status, but very dependable. And then a third car, a car that is very dependable and very high in status. And that's for the 3 groups based on their needs and their perception of what they want. Does that make sense with this example? So now, based on this example, we could try to say, yes, but those groups are still very big. And I want to become much more differentiated by taking just 1 subgroups. And then you say, you know what, why don't you use, let's say, gender, men and women, and then throw this variable of men and women to differentiate between those groups. So it's the same thing. These are the groups, these are the dots. Now, by using gender in addition, then you find that there's 6 specific groups. The more you divide the people into specific groups, the better you start understanding who they are. So that's great. But the problem by doing this is that your potential quantity of customers is becoming less and less and less, as you can imagine, right? Because I had 50,000 people, then I broke them down into 3 groups. So you see, you have that dot there. I don't focus on it. That dot, I don't focus. So I'm already losing some customers. But then when I move in here and I put gender as a characteristics, then there's 2 gender here for the simplicity of it. And so then I could say I go for the purple or I go for the light green. Okay. But then you could say, oh, why don't we throw in there another characteristics? Age, younger, older. So it will break again, yes. And then I say educated, not educated, high income, low income, East Coast, West Coast. Does that make sense? And the more you add characteristics, the better you are understanding who are the customer, because it becomes more and more specific. But the number of potential buyers, customers, becomes smaller and smaller. And so for a business, you have to find a balance between being very specific to the customers and therefore more likely to satisfy them, but having a smaller group of customers as you become more and more specific. You know, at the end, if you keep segmenting, dividing, you end up with one person. But what kind of business can survive from one person? So you have to find a balance between this selection. And so that's the job of targeting, is looking at the size of the targets, the likelihood that they will buy, how much they will buy, how much it's going to cost you to make them buy it, and so forth. So not to lose you, I want you to think about something very simple. So I go back to something extremely simple that you have done. How do you spot a rich woman or a rich man?
Driving a Cybertruck.
Yeah, exactly. Driving a Cybertruck. So someone driving a Cybertruck, you may say, well, thank you, Frida. That was correct. As you think that something they do make them obviously look rich. So by doing this, you have made a decision of what is dividing people into rich and poor based on something that they consume. So do people naturally do segmentation? They do. Do people label other people based on some visual characteristic? They do. So we all do this regularly, and it's just normal. So this is a very important skill in marketing that we all have, and we just have to exercise it. So here's an interesting example. When I was a bachelor student, I did a bachelor degree in marketing, and my first bachelor was in 92. And so in 92, when I did my my degree, for the final exam, it was for Gillette. And so we were supposed to find an opportunity for Gillette. And so in 92, all the research that was done and so forth was on men. There was almost nothing on women. And it was essentially the result was to pretty much add a blade. So there's like 3 blades, and all the research was sort of culminating to the fact that you had to add a 4th blade. And so I forgot how it was called, but let's say it was called XL Turbo Gillette sensor. And so essentially what the corrector wanted to evaluate is then you called it Gillette Sensor Turbo 2. And the Turbo 2 was to add a blade. So that way it was even better than the Turbo. It was Turbo 2. And in fact, that's what happened. The Turbo 2 came, the Turbo 3 came, and then you have the Platinum, Extra, XL, Super Triple Turbo, and all that. So what was funny is that at the time, I said, but it's strange that there's a razor for men. And to me, the opportunity I found is that there were more women that were shaving. And so I wrote my report, not like everybody else, that wrote on the shaver to be for men with 1 extra blade, which is usually the blade that's going to cut you. In fact, if you don't get cut by the 3 blade, adding a 4th blade, that increases your chances to be cut more than anything else. I decided to keep it with the 3 blade, but make it a model for women. And I remember when I did that, I was very happy. I submitted it. The corrector said that there was no such a thing as a woman shaver. And in fact, if you look at the past 30 years, the disruption in the razor industry has been the razors, not so much for men, but it's been the razor for the women. And that's why sometimes what I find very difficult is correctors that evaluate the work that people do based on what they expect the answer to be versus listen to the argument of why does this person think that's the direction that the business should take. Because it should be driven by the data. It should not be driven by what is expected. Because you don't become a successful business person by doing what's expected. Is you succeed because you disrupt, because you come up with a solution that is far superior in a way that was not expected, but it's superior. So you don't want to do things much more complicated every time and think it works better, is you just want to do it in a way that you have expectations. So unfortunately, I didn't get a good grade, even though, and I can be the witness today of the success of my idea back then. Now it's history, and I was correct. Here is one person that is a simple person, that's apparently simple, from Los Angeles. And so this gentleman was in Syria, and I probably know there's been a long war in Syria. And like many Syrians, he flew Syria, and he was a successful business owner in Syria, and he came to Los Angeles, and there's a lot of Syrians in Los Angeles, and many of them work in the liquor stores. It's pretty common to see Syrian in liquor stores. So because of the diaspora and the family relatives, he was able to be in charge of a liquor store. But I don't know if you know, there's thousands of liquor stores in LA. So it becomes a very boring job, and he was starting to find it boring until he decided to do some research and see if there was an opportunity for his liquor store. So what he found is it was the last store before people drove on the road to Lake Arrowhead and Big Bear before they start going up the mountains on the freeway. So he decided to ask himself, what do the people who go to the mountain like to drink? And he found that the people like to drink, what do they like to drink? Craft beer. So it's not that there's the Budweiser drinkers and the cheap beers and all this, but they are also, you know, surprisingly, more than any other groups, a group of people that like craft beer, more fancy beers. And so he knew nothing about craft beers. And what he did is he started learning about it and making special display talking about craft beer. So everyone, why is this? What's the opportunity? Is beer in the mountains are more expensive. Beer in the mountains have less selection. People going to the mountains have higher income and higher expectations, and they used to more fancy things. Based on those opportunities, he changed his store, which was a totally boring and not unique store, his own way, and he changed it into the #1 craft store in Los Angeles and one of the most profitable store in Los Angeles just in a matter of a few years. He became eventually a very wealthy Syrian by making just that change. And he was just one out of thousands of Syrians running those stores, but he just was paying attention. And so the opportunity was the location and the type of situation was the freeway that dictated a specific group of people that would go by there. And he built his reputation also based on the app and what is it called? Yelp ratings that he was getting. So anytime people were putting craft beer, they would find out about La Bodega and the fact that he was there for sale. Does that make sense? Do you understand what I'm trying to say? His success was a better understanding of the market on the consumers. The more you understand your consumers, the more you can be unique, and that's what he did. Now, if we talk again about customers, I don't know if you watched, but this weekend there was the Daytona 500. Anyone watched it? So that was probably the biggest public event of the weekend, this race in Florida called Daytona 500. And so one of the person that was racing this is Austin Cindric. And so Austin Cindric was pretty much leading for like 3 hours until maybe 10 seconds before the end of the race, until he got run over by a car, which he lost control. And instead of finishing first, which that was his position the whole time, he ended up being 14, I think. It's kind of sad. But he won Daytona 500, which is one of the most prestigious races in America, in 2022, and he was just about to win it again if it was not for those last 15 seconds of the race. Anyway, if I was asking you, what car do you think he drives every day? What would you say? Small car, a big car, a slow car, a powerful car, a cheap car, an expensive car. A Fiat?
Yeah.
No, no, it doesn't drive a Fiat.
A pickup truck.
You know, you would imagine he drives a car like this.
No.
No, I don't imagine that at all.
So this, it's like the maybe you don't know what Daytona 500. I mean, they drive those Indy racing cars with what 800 horsepower at 190 miles per hour. I mean, they don't. I don't think these people will be driving a Fiat. But here's what he drives. If you go to his Instagram account, he drives a brick.
Oh my God. My mom had that exact car.
Volvos
Exactly.
1993, yeah.
But so he drives this, but what he does is he put a V8 engine inside because he's doing what is called a sleeper. So he wants people to think it's my mom used to drive this thing, right? That's what he's doing. He's a funny guy. In fact,
So it's when
last year,
Lamborghinis come to him so he can just beat them without them
exactly. Yeah,
you know.
exactly. That's true. But last year he bought my Volvo brick. That was mine. I sold it to Austin Cindric. It's funny. And why am I saying this? Is because you don't know what people do. And that's the idea, is that you can anticipate, but you're never sure. And so like people that are into car racing, they would never believe that Austin Cindric, who almost won the 500 just a few hours ago, that's the type of car he drives and collects. You know, his father is the president of Penske Racing. Penske Racing is the car racing team that is the most iconic in the USA in history for the past 70, 80 years. Anyway, so with this super race car, you will not think about this. But that's what's important in business, is you have to do your research, you have to really understand. And that's what this gentleman did. This gentleman went to France. And when he was in France as a Chinese person, he learned a lot about the French food. And one of the things he was surprised is the fact that in France we eat a lot of cheese. Does cheese exist in China? No, there's no such a thing as cheese in China. So when he went back to China, he was not very rich and he didn't really have a job. But when he was in France, he learned to make cheese. So then he decided to start making cheese in China. And then what happened? Then he was broke because he was not selling any cheese. The Chinese don't want cheese. They don't even know what it is. Maybe they don't even have a name for it, right? So he was not making any money. And then he decided not to close his business and go bankrupt. He decided to do what? He decided to do segmentation, targeting, and positioning. What do you mean? He started looking at the customer and not having prejudice. And he started saying, I'm going to try to sell it to the Chinese. And did that work? Not really. Still. So then he decided to stop looking at the Chinese and look at the foreigners that live in China, because there's more and more foreigners living in China. And those foreigners, they eat cheese, but they can't find cheese, or it's expensive and cheese doesn't travel so well. He decided to make cheese like he was in France and so forth. And then his business overnight became successful when he started targeting the foreigners. But then he started realizing that more and more so, there were also Chinese eating it. But they were not the Chinese that were in China. They were the Chinese that lived overseas, and they were exposed to the cheese and started liking it. And when they went back to China, they say, hey, you know, I can keep eating the cheese that I love. So there are more and more Chinese living overseas, more and more discovering. And now he has a huge growing population. And I think he's pretty soon, he's a multi-millionaire. And pretty soon he's going to be a billionaire by just coming up by being the first Chinese to make cheese in China. Can you imagine? You see how he's laughing? Because it's like printing money. He's becoming so rich. By just being the first one to come up with that idea, it was simple. You don't need to be a scientist or anything. Just make something that people want, that they don't even know, and give it to the people that already know, and be the first, disrupt, and understand the customers, and focus on the customers, and understand their needs. So that's what I've been teaching since the beginning, but that's where I want to go to the next thing, which is the concept of, positioning. Positioning is coming up with an image, and an image that is differentiated, that is better, that you can talk to the customers, that you can afford, and eventually that's going to make you some money. So how do you show positioning? You show it by what is called a positioning map. So a positioning map is you put a map and then you put some adjectives and you try to explain what is it that your image. So this positioning map here is the most simple positioning map that you can Google and find. It just looks at two adjectives, quality and price. So you have high quality, low quality, high price, low price. So the Marriott are very smart about this. All of this belongs to the Marriott. It's one single company. And what they do is they have 4 different brands based on 4 different positioning. High price, high quality, Marriott Marquis, good price, average quality, above average, the Marriott, then you have the Courtyard and the Fairfield. So their positioning is just this concept of good quality above average, right? So the problem by using quality is it's good to teach, but it's not good to use because quality is not something that is it's too broad. It's not specific. Like if I tell you what's a quality hotel, what would you say? What are the characteristics of a quality hotel? That your room be available.
Let's my dog stay.
Let your dog stay. So you see, everyone can have different perspective. In fact, when they do a research in the USA and ask people what's the #1 characteristic of quality, it depends on how you ask it. But when you go and do qualitative research, meaning one-on-one and little by little, and you ask them to tell the truth, it's the smell. People actually use the smell to identify what is quality. And so, now I'm not saying it's true. I'm just telling you that it's a emotional, unconscious way of measuring quality. And so that's why oftentimes in the hotel, they are spending more time putting perfume than actually cleaning, since people measure cleanliness by the smell. And I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying give the customer what they want. And if they measure quality by the smell, make sure the smell is appropriate. So that's very, very interesting. So now you understand those 3 columns, which is 1, divide. So you have come up with the characteristics. So here the example is you can divide by age, you can divide by benefits, by when do they use it, by often time they use it, the personality and all that. Then targeting, it's grouping the people. Divide, group, and then positioning is come up with the image. So the image comes as what the image people want. So now I want to finish with this discussion, which is that segmentation, targeting, and positioning versus PST. Which one do you think is better? And we started this discussion with group 4 on Saturday, and I think it was Alfredo and I discussing this, and the group. But Alfredo and I were very much discussing that. So it was like, what should you do? Should it be STP first, or should it be PST first? What's your perspective? So STP
I'm on
means
team STP.
Yes, so team STP is the one that is in the book, the one that is the professor will tell you, the one that's in Wikipedia, Google, and ChatGPT as the one that you should start with. Because you divide the customers, you find who's the customer that you want to sell something, and then you give them the image of what they want to hear about it. So you adapt to the customer. PST means that you, as a business, decide what you want to be, and then you hunt for those customers that will want what you want to be. It's a much more dangerous, because you may be making something that nobody really wants, or much less people want than you think people want. So it's dangerous. It's risky to go that direction. However, when you talk about that's a discussion that was very interesting that I had with Alfredo. Is Alfredo here?
Yeah, I am.
Yes. So remember, then if you remember the discussion, then you said that
I do.
that STP is the one that should be done, but PST is the one that you prefer, but it has some risks.
Right.
The risk that you're being too into your own creative bubble, and that there's no customers to meet with you. But at the same time, when you're in an artistic industry, you do have to have a personality, right? To start with. You can't be just a blank page that's going to adapt to everything. You should not. Otherwise, I mean, sometimes, you see bands like this that do one album or they do one song, and then they milk that song for their career, an entire career. I know one, for example, from France, that did that and is extremely famous in America. His name is Patrick Hernandez. Do you know his song? His song is called Born to Be Alive. Born to Be Alive. Born to Be Alive. And it's a disco song. And he sells still millions of discs. That's the only thing he did. One song. And that was probably like what? 1978. And he's still extremely successful because of that one song. So he was very much PST and he got lucky. But the idea is that you don't want to hope for luck. But then what I was explaining at Fredo is that therefore you can do PSTP, which is this adjustment where you start really like, who am I? What do I want to do? Then you say, are there a customer that care for this? Yes, but here's the target. And then you do an adjustment of your positioning. So therefore you become more in sync with the market. So you don't want to be just the market, what the market wants, because otherwise you have you're nobody, you're just trying to be something for someone. And PST is where you're just hoping there's someone for you. So you do this adjustment. But I think it's better if you start with you and then adjust to the market and then reinvent yourself into a model that fits you and fits your customer, but you know this in advance. You don't want to do this after the fact. Well, you make a product and then you do, okay, I've made a product. They do a PSTP. It's sort of too late. Is you have to do this ahead of the time. And then it's when you do the last P that you make the product in adjustment of the target that you've already analyzed. Okay. So I just wanted to bring this up again because we had this great discussion on Saturday, and the group 4, at least some members were part of that discussion, and they, I believe, benefited from it, but not the entire class. And that's a discussion that is extremely important in the music industry because you have to give the chance to the creativity, but you don't want to be sort of led only by the creativity. Otherwise, it becomes too risky. So you have to find this fine balance between both. And that's why I call this PSTP. So if you go and look for STP versus PST and you add PSTP on Google, I don't think there's anywhere a place that explains that to you. So I just wanted to bring it up because that's kind of the best practice eventually is to combine the two with P star. All right. Now, let's have the presentation from the group.
So hello everyone. So tonight we will be going over Edward Bernays and his influence in modern marketing and public relations. Our team is made up of Kiara Davis, Vic Gomez, Christian Martin, Gabriel Rosmini, myself, Sofia Garcia, Frida Ibarra, Alyssa Perez, and Liana Rodriguez.
Thank you, Sophia. Now let's get into the man of the hour, Edward Bernays. Bernays was the American nephew of Sigmund Freud. He gave himself the title of the father of modern public relations and is still known as this today. He often referenced his uncle's theories and used them to manipulate the masses. He is also the author of several books, including his most famous work entitled Propaganda, and spent the latter part of his life working in public relations. So Bernays was born in 1891 and grew up attending many family dinner parties. At these parties, his uncle, which is Freud, often shared his theories and research, which fascinated Bernays. As he grew older, he attended Cornell University and earned a degree in agriculture, but instead pursued a career in journalism. In his early adulthood as a journalist, Bernays took on the task of persuading influential readers into having a positive opinion of a very controversial play. By using positive wording and framing, Bernays was able to make the scandalous play popular and liked by many. As he did so well in the entertainment side of journalism, he then moved on to working as a creative press agent for plays and performers. He was the first to utilize celebrities in advertising and advertise products by placing them in films. He was known to use psychology and social sciences to heighten the perception of his clients in the industry. After this, Bernays worked for the American government in creating propaganda for World War I. He described his work as psychological warfare and used manipulation tactics to build domestic and international support for American side of the war. He then moved on to working in public relations counseling. This work earned him the title of the father of American public relations. When beginning this work, he described it as propaganda, but quickly changed his tune when he found out that propaganda as a word received negative backlash. In this work, he was the first to use Freud's ideas to manipulate the masses. Similar to his work in the war, he was also the first to integrate psychology and other social sciences into the world of PR. Bernays significantly contributed to the rise of hyperconsumerism by mastering convincing people to buy what they didn't need. He described this work as manufacturing consent through PR by focusing on unconscious desires and leaning into his uncle's theories.
So influence of Bernays' works. So one of the most disturbing applications of Bernays' theories was by Joseph Goebbels. Joseph Goebbels was the Nazi minister of propaganda and used Bernays' Crystallizing Public Opinion book to manipulate public perception, fueling his destructive campaign against Jewish communities in Germany. In addition, so after FDR's re-election, corporations led by Bernays resisted the New Deal through campaigns that tied big business to national prosperity. An example of this is the campaign for General Motors' Parade of Progress, which showcased technological advances which reinforced corporate success as essential to American future. Bernays was hired to market wristwatches to men. At this time, it was exclusively worn by women, and Bernays found out that soldiers in the fields had to light up their pocket watches in order to read it. As a result, he was able to convince the US Army that wristwatches could save soldiers' lives. His work with Calvin Coolidge. So in order to soften Coolidge's stiff image, Bernays staged a breakfast with various celebrities, including Al Johnson, the Dolly Sisters, and other Broadway stars. The press coverage in the days after humanized Coolidge, demonstrating the power of staged public events. Betty Crocker's dry cake mix wasn't selling well, so Bernays conducted focus groups with American housewives and discovered that they felt very disconnected in the baking process. His solution? Adding an egg to the instructions, which gave housewives a sense of involvement. This simple change successfully boosted sales. To increase bacon sales, Bernays persuaded 5,000 physicians to endorse a hearty breakfast of meat and eggs. The publishings that followed led to a surge in bacon consumption.
So I'm going to talk a little bit on Bernays' impact on business and the industries that worked and such. So he had a major impact and influence with a lot of major players in his time. The list is endless, but I listed a few here. We have General Electric, Procter & Gamble, American Tobacco Company, which we'll talk about in a second, United Fruit Company, Beech Nut Company, General Motors, which we just discussed. He also worked for like CBS, Dodge Motors, Veneta Hairnets. So he touched a lot of industries. And all of these companies, Bernays, led their success through marketing campaigns with very strategic positioning. And he also just was able to create opportunities everywhere and anywhere. Just real quickly, for example, Bernays marketed for GE with the celebration, Lights Golden Jubilee, that celebrated the light bulb's 50th anniversary, which really drew people in at the time and just kept the invention more alive with getting new investors there. And another example, Procter and Gamble's Ivory Soap is a big one as well. So he was basically, he was tasked with the problem that soap at the time would get kids like really irritated in their eyes and stuff. And so what he wanted to do to, lighten that vibe of Ivory Soap, he decided to put on a soap carving contest and introduce it to kids so they'll be more interested. And it worked. And all of his marketing campaigns, almost all of them worked every time. So now I want to talk on Bernays' impact on government. As we just discussed, he worked with Calvin Coolidge. He's worked with a lot of other presidents like Woodrow Wilson, Herbert Hoover, Eleanor Roosevelt, Dwight D. Eisenhower. And he also was really, really involved in the government agencies as well. So he was on the Committee of Public Information that was created during World War I. And the purpose of that was to see if propaganda could be used during peacetime after that. He was also part of the Office of War Information, United States Information Agency. And his long-lasting and social culture impacts include like World War II, which we just discussed about and we'll talk about further. And he also gave a lot of ideas of how to survive, like how capitalism could survive within a democratic society, which is very important. And at large, the field of psychology was changed by Bernays' impact. And he ultimately created public relations and was able to turn that into a profession. Very, very, very important. But how did he come up with these ideas?
Well, Edward Bernays' theories and his framework behind manipulating and propagandizing the masses are built around a somewhat dim look on society and on civilization as a whole. You can see Freud's view of the unconscious mind as the driver of social behavior in his work, and he was also inspired by Gustave Le Bon, who studied crowd psychology, and Walter Lipson, who saw democracy as dysfunctional due to the incompetence of the public. As for Bernays' own views, he believed that the unreliable, undisciplined, and malleable masses are quick to behave like inhumane beings, but slow to put away with worn-out notions or accept new ideas. It was therefore the responsibility of the elite to help guide them towards their own best interest through the manipulation of public opinion via propaganda. To Bernays, persuasion need not be constrained by limitations such as logic, truth, or science. Whether for the purposes of education, philanthropy, economic gain, or political interest, Bernays posits that persuasion is best achieved by appealing to one's basic instincts of self-preservation, procreation, pride, love, and their unconscious desires and prejudices. And while he differentiated between proper and impropaganda in a 1983 interview with Bill Moyers, his own history of work does beg the question as to where the line between proper and improper is drawn. His extensive list of high-profile clients included the US government, American tobacco industry, the NAACP, and the Chiquita fruit brand, who at the time controlled by force almost half of Guatemala with the help of local Contra armies and the US State Department's resident coup architect, John Foster Dulles. To his credit, Bernays stopped his work with the tobacco lobby when evidence of smoking's carcinogenic effects were discovered. And when Hitler and the German Nazi Party approached the Viennese Jew, he refused to work with them. They still used his work. And while his view of the public may have been bleak, his own view of humanity's potential seemed paradoxically optimistic. He believed that a public that learns more and more to express itself will learn more and more how to overcome tyranny of every sort. And every man who teaches the public how to ask for what it wants is at the same time teaching the public how to safeguard against his own potential tyranny. After the Second World War, Wilhelm Reich, a psychologist, identified the manipulation of unconscious sexual frustrations as key to fascist propaganda's success. Instead of seeing the public as something to be manipulated for the sake of social progress, Reich states that the discovery of the natural biological work democracy in international human intercourse is the answer to fascism. While Reich observed fascism firsthand before escaping to Norway, psychologist Viktor Frankl lived through the genocide and concluded that finding purpose for one's life through logotherapy or searching for meaning in life, rather than being driven by the unconscious mind, is the key to happiness. While Bernays' views might make sense through a Kafkaesque lens of the world as a place of meaningless suffering dictated by mechanical empiricism, not everybody would agree with his views on society. Philosophers like Judith Butler argue that the authoritarian state uses language and social normality to force people to conform to rigid social roles, and instead supports a more Hegelian view of absolute idealism, where self-conscious minds, through evolving in their understanding of the world, are capable of democratically creating a state that protects its people without controlling them or their desires.
Edward Bernays' Torches of Freedom campaign was a pivotal moment in public relations history. Launched in 1929, the campaign was designed to break the social taboo against women and smoking in public. Bernays orchestrated this campaign on behalf of the American Tobacco Company, which wanted to expand its market by encouraging women to smoke. Now, let's look at some key elements of the campaign.
Bernays set out to experiment with the minds of the popular classes. His most dramatic experiment was to persuade women to smoke. At that time, there was a taboo against women smoking, and one of his early clients, George Hill, the president of the American Tobacco Corporation, asked Bernays to find a way of breaking it. A. Brill was one of the first psychoanalysts in America, and for a large fee, he told Bernays that cigarettes were a symbol of the penis and of male sexual power. He told Bernays that if he could find a way to connect cigarettes with the idea of challenging male power, then women would smoke, because then they would have their own penises.
Well, with that said, let's talk about the key elements of this campaign. First is the psychological approach, which recognized that smoking could be framed as a symbol of women's liberation rather than just a habit. Second, the use of feminism. He hired feminist activists to stage a public protest during the 1929 Easter Sunday parade in New York City. These women, coached by Bernays, lit cigarettes in a public display, calling them torches of freedom. Third here would be the media manipulation. Bernays ensued that photographers and reporters were present to capture the moment, making it appear as spontaneous act of rebellion against oppression. Major newspapers covered the event, reinforcing the idea that smoking was a statement of women's independence. And lastly, it left a lasting impact. The campaign successfully changed public perception, contributing to a significant increase in female smokers in the following decades. It also demonstrated the power of PR in shaping societal terms. And what about the advertisement that went into this campaign? Well, women are free. An advertisement from the tobacco company proclaiming women are free. An ancient prejudice has been removed, highlighting the campaign's message of liberation. These images illustrate the strategic efforts of the Torches of Freedom campaign to associate smoking with women's liberation and equality. Despite its success from a marketing standpoint, the Torches of Freedom campaign had a long-term negative consequences as it helped fuel smoking-related health issues among women. However, it remains a go-to example of how PR can influence social behavior.
Edward Bernays revolutionized marketing and public relations by using psychology to influence behavior. His ideas continue to shape how brands, businesses, and even governments interact with the masses. So we'll focus on two key areas of his legacy that we see today. First, emotional branding. Bernays recognized that consumers seek deeper connections with brands. Today, this subconscious influence drives success, but can also backfire when authenticity is questioned. Second, modern political propaganda, which is perhaps his most concerning influence. His strategies are evident in the manipulation of public opinion through emotion and the rise of disinformation. So as you can see, the core of Bernays' legacy is the power of emotion. So let's explore how emotional branding shapes marketing and PR today. So emotional branding is a powerful tool, but only if done right. Take Nike 2012's Find Your Greatness campaign. Instead of featuring elite athletes, Nike showcased everyday people, like this young boy that you see on the screen, pushing past their limits. Nike wasn't just selling athletic wear, they were inspiring audiences on a deeper level. The result was a global conversation on inclusivity, accessibility, and personal greatness. So the key takeaway here is how authentic storytelling and universal experiences can make emotional branding meaningful. But if this is not done right, it can backfire, which brings me to my next example. So I'm sure everyone here remembers Pepsi's 2017 Jump In commercial with Kendall Jenner. If you don't remember, Pepsi aired an ad where Jenner seemingly diffuses a protest by handing a police officer a can of Pepsi. So Pepsi claimed that this ad was to promote unity and peace, but as you can see from these screenshots here, they completely missed the mark. The public response was overwhelmingly negative, with people calling it tone deaf, disrespectful, and insensitive. And even Bernice King, Martin Luther King Jr.'s daughter, weighed in on this conversation. Pepsi quickly pulled this ad and issued an apology within only 48 hours. So the key takeaway here is that emotional branding must be genuine and respectful, especially with social issues. And as this may seem obvious to all of us, but clearly not to Pepsi at the time, sensitive topics should not be exploited for commercial gain. At the end of the day, a soda brand probably isn't the best spokesperson for complex social movements. So now that we've seen how Bernays' emotional branding is used and even misused, let's look at its role beyond advertising and into politics. Frida will now explore how these tactics appear in modern political propaganda.
So we mentioned that Bernays believed that public opinion could be shaped most effectively through emotional appeals, including fear, emotions based off identity, and emotions from prejudice rather than facts. One example was post 9/11 rhetoric with phrases like war on terror, axis of evil, and weapons of mass destruction, all which created public fear to justify war, ultimately fueling Islamophobia in the US. We also know more recently that this emotional manipulation extends to today's era of disinformation with COVID-19 and the misinformation that was shared then, such as anti-mask conspiracies and anti-vax conspiracies, all being spread through social media. And so Bernays' influence is alive in how fear and disinformation continue to steer political discourse. And so looking more into how this affects us politically, we took a closer look at voter manipulation in US elections. Bernays' methods influenced psychological targeting in elections. Cambridge Analytica in 2016, harvest Facebook data to micro-target voters, exploiting fears of race, immigration, and other social issues to influence Trump's win. Fast forward to last November, Elon Musk and his influence with X and his wealth became a vehicle for misinformation, boosted pro-Trump content, and biased algorithms. And on top of that, Musk donated over $227 million to super PACs, which funded targeted political ads, further blurring the lines between tech power and democracy. So our summary of opinion is that Bernays' legacy is indeed complex. On one hand, he made a profound impact on public relations and marketing, enabling social good campaigns mentioned by Alyssa, as well as promoting advancing public opinion mentioned by Gabe. On the other hand, he did lay the groundwork for an unethical political propaganda, which includes emotional manipulation, misinformation, and the erosion of trust in democracy.
So, in conclusion, Edward Bernays, often referred to as the father of modern public relations, revolutionized the fields of marketing and public relations by integrating psychological techniques to influence public behavior. His innovative campaigns, such as the Torches of Freedom initiative, demonstrated the power of manipulating unconscious desires to drive consumerism and societal change. While his contributions laid the foundation for modern emotional branding and effective public relations strategies, they also paved the way for unethical practices in political propaganda and disinformation. Bernays' legacy is a complex blend of groundbreaking achievements and ethical dilemmas, highlighting the profound impact of his work on both positive and negative aspects of modern communication. Thank you.
So I'm going to present the 4 P's, starting with the first P of product. So it's going to be very focused on the P of products. And as I'm doing this, I will be talking about branding. So the 4 P's is also called the marketing mix. It's those 4 P that needs to be presented when you talk about a company, the product that you're selling, the place where you're selling, the price, what price of the promotion is the communication. But within the P of the product mix, you have therefore within the P of the marketing mix, you also have the P of the product, and within the product, you have the product mix. So that's all the different elements within the product that you need to take into consideration when you sell a product. The image of the brand, the services, the different packaging instructions, and maybe the image of the retail store, and maybe some other financing and things like this that need to be taken into consideration. Now, when you talk about a product, it's the generic terms for all the things that you're selling. So you're selling the goods, the services, the organization, IDs, the people, and location, with people, services, location, organization being the biggest one when it comes to the music industry. So a product is a generic term, and it encompasses all of this. So when we look at people, you sell people for the sport, the music, the movies industry. You sell goods as physical objects that you will be selling. So here we see IKEA with different furniture and decoration accessories. So IKEA sells products, and more specifically, goods. But you could be selling a product that consists in a location, that consists in an organization. So you could be selling vacation in Mexico, Hawaii, that's a location. An organization such as CSUN or the Olympic Games, like an event. The Olympic Committee or the games as the event. You could be selling an idea as well. Don't drink and drive. And obviously, you could be selling a service. So service is very particular in the sense that it's the fastest growing product category, and it's becoming the most common category in the United States. And services, I'm going to spend a little bit more time. What's interesting about the services is there's a continuum between being more of a service or being more of a product. So there's no such a service that is just a service. There's always an element of goods within services. So services with some goods, services with more goods with some services, and then eventually just goods. So services are an element of a product, an element of a good, and sometimes just a service in itself. Services also have the element of the fact that the person who's consuming the service may be somewhat involved or part of the service being rendered. So if you go to the doctor is doing an exam, and the patient is also part of the service in receiving the exam. If you go to a concert, there's a person singing and there's a person receiving, and the person receiving has an impact on the performance of the one producing the service at the time. So more or less involvement from a human providing the service, where you could have an ATM machine, it's a service, but no contact with a human, then you could walk inside the bank, and in that situation, there's more contact. So more or less contacts. You go to Disneyland, you have less contact if you get a haircut. More contact with the haircut, but still human being involved. So services have 4 characteristics. The biggest one, most common one discussed is called intangibility, which is that the fact that it cannot be felt. You cannot touch the service. Service is produced at the same time as it is consumed. So that's the fact that it's inseparable. You're consuming it and it is produced at the same time. Variable is because there's oftentimes more or less humans being involved in the production of the service. So it cannot be the same all the time. It's not like a good which is produced by a machine, and there's some level of differences, but it's more objectively staying the same because it's produced to be the same. There's more control of the quality of the performance when you make a product than on the services. When you go to a restaurant, it may be better sometimes than some other times because there's a variation, because it's made for the consumption, and therefore there's variation because there's a human touch. Perishability is you cannot store it. So therefore, if you're doing hotel rooms, it's a service. So therefore, you can't store a number of hotel rooms. They are consumed as the day go by, and therefore you have to create a program in order to sell inventory of services. So services have all of these different characteristics, and it's important to see them. When you sell a product, you sell this product with the concept of the onion shape, where you have different layers of the onion, because you have the most important benefit of buying a product, which is the core benefit or the core of the service. And then you have the actual level, and then you have the augmented. So the different features of the product, that's the actual, different designs, the different brand name, the different quality, the different packaging, that's the actual, versus the after-sale services, the delivery, the financing, the warranties, the installation. These will be the augmented. So if we look at a thread mill, for example, what would be the core? So the core is the health benefits that you gain from using the treadmill. What about the actual product? So that's the different brands, the different features, the different designs, the different quality that you get from the various treadmill that you get. You see there's variety of quality treadmill with different prices, and that actual product will vary. Again, also what will vary is the augmented product in the fact that there's financing, maybe there is some sort of warranty that gets extended, maybe at a certain price it's free delivery versus you have to pay for the delivery. So all of these different layers of the onion of the product are very important. What about CSUN? What would be the core of the service of education that you get at CSUN? What is the core?
Would it be the degree?
It's the degree, it's the knowledge, exactly. So that's the reason why you go to universities, for knowledge and degree and graduation. What about the actual? What could that be?
That's what we're doing right now.
So yes, the actual is the different classes, the different specific knowledge that you gain, the different professors. So yes, that's what you're doing right now. And what would be the augmented? The augmented, maybe
the network that you build with your peers or the professor.
Yeah, so that's like the alumni. Yeah, maybe the food court, the food cafeteria, maybe the sports facilities, if you use the sport at CSUN, maybe the medical help, maybe the career placement. And I think, you are talking about more like the alumni network in addition. So all of these will be the augmented. So if you are a university and you therefore want to improve your business, you can't just say, oh, we want to improve having more professors, or we want to improve the marketing, or we want to improve the campus parking. The parking is an augmented. So you'll have to think about what you do to the core, what you do for the actual, what you do for this. So it's important to think of the overall onion delivery, not just some of the elements, and see that there's things that are more critical and things that are less critical, but then you can add less critical thing, and that still adds to the perception of the quality of the service or the product or the organization, whatever. So it's important to see, so we just discussed that, it's important to see this onion shape. Now, when you sell products, is you have 4 categories of products: the convenience, the specialty, the shopping, and the unsold. So the convenient is the one that you buy regularly. You don't see much difference between the brands. You don't spend much money. You don't spend much time buying it. You don't do much comparative study. You just buy them. So you buy and this one is a little difficult to say because I was going to say you buy milk, for example, as a convenience product, but that's not so true. There may be people that don't buy milk blindfolded, is they look for a specific brand of milk with maybe a specific category of milk. Maybe there's some people that buy raw milk, for example, and they say I only buy raw milk, and therefore they go to I don't know, Mother's supermarket because that's only one that sell, or one of the only that sells raw milk. And there's some people that would say, no, I only buy the digestive enhanced calcium added vitamin brand, which is X. And there may be some people that say, no, I only buy, I don't know, cashew, almond milk, and so forth. So not every product is convenience. It's more of a matter, a personal matter. For example, I would buy chewing gum personally as convenience because I don't totally care for the differences between the brand. But some of you may think of chewing gum as not all being the same, and there may be a variation of your experience between the brands. So, but the idea is what is cheaper, that you don't see much difference between the brands and you don't have regrets when you buy the products. You know, it's no big deal. You just buy it because it's convenient. Now you have shopping products, which are the one that you see different between the brands, that you don't buy all the time, and that you do some comparisons, and you constantly see if there's something that is better. So maybe buying a radio, TV, a computer, a washing machine, a car. So all of these would be shopping goods because they will require some, you know, there may be some regrets, there may be some involvement, there may be something that you care very much. So specialty goods are the ones that are even more specific, like a wedding gown, a graduation gown, a very luxurious product, you know, like I don't know, a luxury watch, a house. All of these are specialty, and it's things that we are very careful when we buy. We buy it from a specific store, maybe from a specific seller, and we may even travel to gain information. We may study, ask for more opinions for the specialty goods. And then the last one, which is the most curious one of the four, is the unsold. So there's variety of unsold. There's the one that are unsold because you're not the target. I don't know, like a walker, you know, I don't know, a wheelchair, for example. Like I'm not a person who specializes in wheelchair. I don't know much about wheelchair, and the reason is that I never needed a wheelchair, and I don't know anyone with a wheelchair, so I have little knowledge. If you ask me, give me the name of a brand of wheelchair, I don't know any. So to me, wheelchairs are unsold. So there's the one unsold which don't belong to something you would buy, and then there's the unsold that you just don't know. So as I've mentioned a number of times, I have been selling cognac for about 20 years. I have my own company that sells cognac, and oftentimes cognac is an unsold product for some category of consumers. So African American cognac is not unsold, but for the majority of maybe Hispanic people, cognac is more unsold. If you're Armenian, cognac is not unsold. If you're Russian heritage, cognac is not unsold. But if you're, let's say, I don't know, from Costa Rica, or Guatemala, Chile, or Mexico, they don't think about cognac. It's not something that they look for. So you have to sort of inform and educate them. It's not something they think of. Or for example, if you're 20 years old, you don't think about life insurance. It's unsold because you're not really in the typical group of people that think about these products. Now, the product mix decision is something that is important when you create a product line, is you have to think about the various products and where do they fit. And you have to think of the terms of the variation of products, and that's called the width. Then the different diverse variation within the product category, and that's called the depth, and then the number of products that you make. So if you use something like a car, let's say you have a two-door car, a four-door car, and a van. So that would be 3 width. And then within the van, you have like 2 different vans. So that's the depth. Within the coupe, you have 4 different coupes, and that's the 4 coupes depth. So the depth is the variation within each category versus the width is the variation of categories, and the length is the number total of product that you're selling. The consistency is the idea that you want to have the same kind of product. image, well, there's some element of the DNA that you keep across the different products.